The ballroom at the Astor Mansion was not a room. It was a galaxy. 1,000 candles, each a captured star, blazed in the crystal chandeliers, scattering diamond light across the silks, satins, and jewels of New York's 400. The air, thick with the scent of hothouse roses and French perfume, vibrated with the murmur of powerful names and the soaring notes of a string orchestra. To an outsider, it was a vision of heaven. But to me, Eleanor Vance, standing on the arm of my new husband, Theodore, it was a battlefield, and I was dangerously unarmed. 6 months ago, I was Eleanor Finch, a librarian's daughter from a respectable but punishingly dull corner of Philadelphia. My life was bound by the Dewey Decimal System and the quiet turning of pages. Then Theodore Vance, son of a railroad baron whose name was synonymous with ruthless expansion, had swept into my life. He'd spoken of a new world, a new life in New York, a city where ambition was the only currency that mattered. I had been dazzled by the promise of it all. Now I was beginning to understand that I had not married a man, but an empire, and empires are built on bone. "Smile, my dear," Theodore murmured, his grip on my elbow a subtle, iron reminder. "Mrs. Astor is watching." I forced a pleasant expression, my cheeks aching from the effort. Caroline Astor, the undisputed queen of this universe, sat enthroned across the room, her gaze sweeping over the crowd with the dispassionate air of a goddess inspecting her flock. To be smiled upon by her was to exist. To be ignored was social death. "She's judging the new acquisitions," Theodore continued, his voice low. "Your gown, your jewels, your composure. Everything is a test." He spoke as if we were discussing a new locomotive. And in a way, we were. I was his latest acquisition, a woman with a lineage clean enough to be respectable, but with no powerful family of my own to complicate his ambitions. I was meant to be beautiful, placid, and above all, an asset. A man with a florid face and a waistcoat straining at the buttons approached us, his smile revealing teeth stained with tobacco. "Vance, a pleasure. And this must be the lovely bride." He bowed, his eyes lingering on the diamond necklace, a gift from my father-in-law that felt more like a jeweled collar around my throat. "Mr. Davies," Theodore said with practiced cordiality, "may I present my wife, Eleanor? My dear Mr. Davies is an alderman with the city, a very influential friend." I understood the unspoken meaning. Mr. Davies was a cog in the great, corrupt machine of Tammany Hall, the political organization that held New York in its grip. Men like him were bought and sold by men like my father-in-law to secure city contracts, crush strikes, and ensure that the law was a tool for the powerful, not a shield for the weak. "An honor, Mrs. Vance," Davies said, his gaze oily. "Your husband and his father are visionaries. They are building the very future of this great nation." I thought of the article I had read just last week, hidden from Theodore, detailing the accident on a Vance Railroad construction line in Pennsylvania. An improperly braced tunnel had collapsed, burying more than a dozen emigrant workers. The official report, signed by a man undoubtedly in my father-in-law's pocket, had blamed the workers' own carelessness. The future Mr. Davies spoke of was being paved over the bodies of the poor. "You are too kind, sir," I replied, my voice sounding faint and foreign to my own ears. As he moved on, Theodore leaned in again. "Well done. You see, it is a simple game. You are a natural." But I did not feel like a natural. I felt like a fraud in a borrowed dress, a ghost haunting a feast. My gaze drifted across the room, past the laughing women and the men puffing on cigars, their talk a low rumble of stock prices and political maneuvers. I saw the faces of the Gilded Age, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Morgans. They were the architects of modern America, their wealth a testament to the nation's booming industry and boundless promise. Yet, I was beginning to see the truth Mark Twain had hinted at when he named the era. Beneath the shimmering gold was a dark, cheap metal, My eyes met those of a woman standing near a marble pillar. She was older, dressed in a severe, dark silk that stood out against the pastels of the younger women. Her name was Mrs. Edith Wharton, a woman from one of the city's oldest families, and it was said she possessed a mind as sharp as the diamonds. At her throat, she was not smiling. Her expression was one of intense, analytical observation, as if she were a naturalist cataloging the predatory rituals of a strange and fascinating species. In her gaze, I saw a flicker of something I recognized, a profound and weary understanding of the hollowness of this spectacle. Theodore, oblivious, steered me toward another conversation, another powerful man to be charmed, another lie to be swallowed. I felt the weight of the crown I now wore, not of gold, but of expectation and complicity. I had wanted a bigger life, but I had not understood its cost. Here, in the heart of the American dream, surrounded by unimaginable prosperity, I was more trapped than I had ever been. The ballroom was a cage, its bars forged from gold and power, and I, along with everyone else, was merely a prisoner, dancing to the tune of ambition before the inevitable fall. The days following the Astor Ball bled into one another, a disorienting pageant of social obligations. There were luncheons where the main course was gossip, afternoon teas that served as interrogations, and opera nights where the drama in the velvet-lined boxes far outshone that on the stage. I learned to navigate the treacherous currents of conversation, to smile when a rival's name was mentioned with saccharine praise, and to offer opinions as substantive as spun sugar. I was learning the steps to the dance, but I could feel the rhythm of it grinding away at the person I used to be. The Vance mansion on Fifth Avenue was not a home. It was a monument to power. Its Gothic spires and granite facade were designed to intimidate, to declare its owner a modern-day feudal lord. Inside, it was a cavern of dark, carved wood, heavy velvet draperies that suffocated the sunlight, and halls lined with European art bought by the ton. It was overseen by the true ruler of the Vance dynasty, my mother-in-law. Mrs. Augusta Vance. Augusta was a formidable woman, clad perpetually in black silk that rustled like dry leaves. She had not been born to this wealth, but had married into it, and she guarded her position with the ferocity of a dragon guarding its hoard. Where her husband, the elder Mr. Vance, was a predator in the world of business, Augusta was a predator in the world of society. Her approval was a currency more valuable and far harder to obtain than gold. "Eleanor," she said to me one morning in the parlor, her voice as crisp as a winter frost. She did not look up from her needlepoint. "I have reviewed the guest list for your first official dinner party. It is inadequate." I stood before her like a schoolgirl before the headmistress. I thought I had included all of Theodore's most important business associates. "Business is handled by men," she stated, her needle piercing the taut fabric. "Your duty is to cultivate the wives. It is the women who grant the access, who solidify the alliances. You have invited Mrs. Morgan, which is acceptable, but you have neglected to include Mrs. Fish, an unforgivable oversight. Her influence at Newport is critical for our summer plans." She finally looked at me, her eyes like chips of flint. "Do not mistake beauty for utility, child. Your face may have opened the door, but it is your strategic acumen that will keep you inside." Her words were a cold slap. I was not a wife, not a partner. I was a general in a social war one had not known I was fighting. My relationship with Theodore offered no refuge. The charming, attentive suitor I had known in Philadelphia had vanished, replaced by a man consumed by his father's ambitions. Our conversations were transactional. He would inform me of a rival's latest move on the stock market or instruct me on which railroad magnate's wife required a flattering visit. The man himself was a ghost in his own life, his thoughts and actions dictated by the towering shadow of his father. One afternoon, seeking a moment of peace, I slipped into the library, my one sanctuary in the oppressive house. I was reaching for a volume of Emerson when I heard voices from the adjoining study. The heavy oak door left slightly ajar. It was Theodore and his father. The Pinkertons have the situation at the Pittsburgh mill contained, his father said, his voice a low growl. The strike leaders have been dealt with. The new workers, the Hungarians, will work for half the price and won't complain. And the union? Theodore asked, his voice strained. The union has been reminded that the police commissioner is a dear friend of ours, his father scoffed. They will posture and preen for the papers, but they will do nothing. The cost of this brief disruption is regrettable, but it was necessary to break them. We cannot allow our profits to be dictated by the whims of men who are easily replaced. A cold dread seeped into my bones. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was notorious, a private army hired by industrialists to intimidate, infiltrate, and violently crush labor movements. The dealt with strike leaders were likely beaten and blacklisted, their families left destitute. And the new workers, the desperate immigrants, were being pitted against the old, a tactic designed to keep them all powerless. I peeked through the crack in the door. My father-in-law was a bull of a man, with a thick neck and hands that looked capable of bending steel themselves. He stood before a large map of his railroad empire, his finger tracing a line westward. Theodore stood beside him, his posture deferential, his face pale. He looked trapped, a prince who longed to be king but was terrified of the bloody path to the throne. You must learn this, Theodore, his father said, turning to face him. This city, this nation, it is not built by poets or philosophers. It is built by men like us. Men who are willing to make the hard decisions. Steel is not forged with sentiment. Nor is wealth. Remember that. Theodore simply nodded, his jaw tight. I shrank back from the door, my heart pounding. I was living in a house built on the exploitation of thousands, my comfort purchased with the misery of others. The diamonds around my neck felt as if they were searing my skin. This was the source of the Vance fortune. It wasn't just ambition and ingenuity. It was a calculated, ruthless disregard for human life. Later that evening, as I dressed for dinner, Theodore entered my rooms. He presented me with a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings, a perfect, dazzling blue. A gift, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes, for being such a credit to me at the Astors. I looked at the beautiful cold stones, then at my husband's face. I saw the study, the map, and the ghost of the broken strike. I wanted to scream, to ask him if he knew what these jewels were truly made of, if he could hear the suffering that paid for them, but I did not. I simply smiled the placid smile he expected. Thank you, Theodore, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a grateful wife. They are exquisite. As he fastened them to my ears, his fingers cool against my skin, I felt the last vestiges of the Philadelphia librarian die. A new woman was being forged in her place, one who understood that in this world, survival meant wearing a mask so perfectly that you risked forgetting you had a face underneath. The dinner party was my first true test as the new Mrs. Vance. The dining room, a cavern of mahogany and gold leaf, was set for 20. The table groaned under the weight of porcelain, silver, and a centerpiece of orchids so exotic they seemed alien. Every detail, from the placement of the name cards to the temperature of the wine, had been scrutinized by Augusta. My performance tonight would cement my status or mark me as a failure. I stood beside Theodore, greeting our guests. The men were titans of industry, their names etched on bank buildings and railroad cars. The women were their gilded partners, their social power as real and as hard-won as their husbands' fortunes. I smiled, I laughed, I made the appropriate small talk, my mind a whirlwind of names, connections, and calculated flatteries. I was playing Augusta's game, and to my own horror, I was playing it well. My carefully orchestrated seating chart placed me next to Mr. Coleman, a banking magnate with ties to the Vance empire. He was a silver-haired man with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "A splendid evening, Mrs. Vance," he commented, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin. "Your husband is a fortunate man. It is not every day that beauty and efficiency are found in the same package." The compliment was double-edged, acknowledging both my appearance and my successful execution of the social ritual. "You flatter me, Mr. Coleman," I replied. "I am merely a student of my mother-in-law's excellent tutelage." "Indeed," he said, a glint in his eye. "Augusta Vance is a remarkable strategist. But tell me, as a newcomer to our little world, what do you truly make of it all? The pace, the scale. It must be quite a change from the quiet libraries of Philadelphia." His question was a deliberate probe, a test of my discretion. The expected answer was a breathy declaration of wonder and awe. But something in his intelligent, searching gaze made me bold. "It is formidable," I said, choosing my words with care. "One feels as if they are standing at the very center of a great machine. Mr. Coleman, you can feel the hum of its power, the turning of its gears. But one also wonders about the cost of the coal that fires its engines." Mr. Coleman's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I feared I had made a terrible mistake, revealed a crack in my carefully constructed facade. Then, a slow, genuine smile touched his lips. "Aptly put, Mrs. Vance," he said in a low voice. "Very few people ever think to ask about the coal." He leaned closer. "Be careful who you share such astute observations with. In this world, questions are often more dangerous than answers." His warning sent a chill down my spine, but it was also a spark of connection, a recognition that someone else saw the machinery for what it was. For the rest of the dinner, I felt his eyes on me, not with judgment, but with a newfound, cautious interest. As the ladies retired to the parlor, leaving the men to their cigars and brandy, I felt the suffocating weight of their conversation descend. They spoke of Newport cottages and Parisian gowns, their words a shield against the harsh realities their husbands manipulated daily. It was in this perfumed prison that I had an encounter that would alter my course. A young woman named Alice, the timid wife of a junior banker, accidentally spilled a drop of coffee on the pristine white rug. The collective gasp from the other women was sharp and vicious. Mrs. Fish, a woman whose tongue was known to be lethal, began to circle, her smile predatory. "My dear Mrs. Rutherford," she cooed, "one must be so careful with borrowed things." The implication that Alice's social standing was as precarious as her grip on the coffee cup was clear. Before I could think, the librarian's daughter I had buried spoke up. "Oh, nonsense, Mrs. Fish," I said, my voice clear and bright. I walked over and deliberately nudged the coffee table with my hip, causing my own cup to spill. "These things happen to everyone. It is the fault of these delicate, wobbly tables. Augusta," I called to my mother-in-law, "we must have the carpenter see to these at once, lest we all ruin your beautiful carpet." The room fell silent. I had broken the cardinal rule. I had defied the social hierarchy and defended the weak. Mrs. Fish's face hardened. But then Augusta, after a terrifyingly long pause, gave a curt nod. "An excellent point, Eleanor. See to it tomorrow." The tension broke. The other women, following Augusta's lead, murmured their agreement. I had taken a tremendous risk, but it had paid off. I had shown that I would not be a passive player in their cruel games. Later, as she was leaving, Alice Rutherford grasped my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. It was a small victory, but it was mine. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the library. The house was silent, the great machine momentarily at rest. I found a book on my old desk, one I had brought from Philadelphia, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I opened it, and my eyes fell upon a familiar line. "I am large, I contain multitudes." I thought of the multitudes contained within this house, within this city. The titans and the workers, the queens and the pawns, the gleaming ambition, and the grimy cost. I thought of the woman I was becoming, a strategist, a survivor, a silent rebel. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. I turned to see Theodore standing in the doorway, not as the confident railroad heir, but as a ghost in his own home. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. "I cannot do it. Eleanor," he whispered, his voice cracking with a despair so profound it startled me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I just saw the ledgers for the Pittsburgh mill, the list of casualties, the payments to keep the families quiet. My father calls it the cost of progress. He finally looked at me, his face a mask of anguish. "I think it is the price of our souls." It was the first time I had seen the man behind the mask, the frightened son beneath the heir's armor. In that moment, he was not my jailer, but my fellow prisoner. I walked towards him, and for the first time since coming to New York, I placed a hand on his arm not as a duty, but as an instinct. The great machine had a ghost in it after all, and I realized my fight was not just for my own survival, but perhaps for his as well.